The command deck of the star cruiser Valiant was alive with the soft hum of machinery and the occasional beep of a sensor. Captain Elias Reed stood before the main viewport, gazing out into the vast blanket of stars. His first officer, Lieutenant Mara Cole, approached him with a datapad in hand. "Captain, we've picked up a distress signal from a sector we've yet to chart," Mara reported, her voice echoing slightly in the quiet of the deck. Elias turned, his interest piqued. "Show me the coordinates." Mara handed him the datapad. The screen displayed a series of complex astronomical data pinpointing the origin of the signal. "It's from planet Xylix. The message is looped and it's weak, but it's definitely a call for help." "Xylix?" Elias rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Never heard of it. What do we know about the system?" "Very little," Mara replied as she tapped on the pad, bringing up a star map. "It's on the edge of the galactic rim, outside known space territories. No records of colonization or contact." Elias's eyes narrowed. "Prepare a course, Mara. We're going to Xylix. Alert the crew and have them ready within the hour." "Yes, sir," Mara affirmed, before leaving to carry out her orders. As the crew busied themselves with preparations, Elias entered his private quarters to gear up for the potential dangers of an unknown planet. Soon he was joined by Dr. Simon Fletcher, the ship's chief medical officer. "Going into the unknown again, Elias?" Simon asked, his tone both wary and excited. "That's the job," Elias replied, as he checked the charge on his blaster. "Besides, someone's calling for help. We can't just ignore it." "Indeed we can't," Simon agreed. "I've prepared the medical bay for any contingencies. Alien environments can be unpredictable." Elias nodded, feeling the weight of command settle on his shoulders. "Let's hope it's a simple rescue mission." Hours later, the Valiant exited hyperspace, revealing the blue-green orb of Xylix below them. Elias ordered the ship into a geosynchronous orbit and assembled his landing team, including Mara and Simon. As they descended in the shuttle, the planet's surface came into sharper view. Vast oceans interspersed with dark green landmasses and swirling clouds. "Looks peaceful enough from up here," Mara commented, peering out the shuttle window. "Appearances can be deceiving," Elias remarked. "Stay sharp." The shuttle landed near the source of the distress signal, a sprawling biomechanical structure that seemed to pulse with life. The team disembarked, weapons ready, scanning the environment. "This architecture," Simon whispered. "It's unlike anything we've cataloged." Elias led the way towards the structure, his boots crunching on the alien soil. The air was thick with a sweet, musky odor, and the light from the planet's twin suns cast eerie shadows on the ground. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the structure, a creature, tall and insect-like, with shimmering wings and multiple eyes. It stopped a few meters away, its body language cautious but not overtly hostile. "Greetings. I am Captain Elias Reed of the star cruiser Valiant," Elias called out, lowering his weapon slightly. "We received your distress call." The creature buzzed, and its mouthparts moved delicately before a device on its body translated its words into English. "I am Lyrax, steward of the Hive Queen. You are the first to answer our call." "What seems to be the problem here?" Elias asked, stepping forward. "Our queen is dying," Lyrax replied, the tone translated into one of unmistakable urgency. "We seek a cure only found in the biology of humans. Without it, our people will perish." Elias exchanged a glance with his team. They had expected many things, but this was far beyond their imaginations. "We'll do what we can to help," he said finally. "Lead us to your queen." As Lyrax turned to guide them into the heart of the structure, Elias felt the magnitude of the situation. They weren't just stepping into unknown territory. They were walking into a pivotal moment that might well dictate the future of two species. The interior of the Xylixian structure was a labyrinth of bioluminescent corridors and expansive chambers, all pulsing with a life of their own. The walls seemed to breathe, contracting and expanding rhythmically, as if the entire building were alive. Captain Elias Reed and his team followed Lyrax through the winding passageways, each turn and arch revealing more about the alien civilization's unique blend of biology and technology. As they walked, Dr. Simon Fletcher leaned closer to Elias, whispering, The integration of organic and synthetic is phenomenal. It's like the whole structure is part of their ecosystem. Elias nodded, equally impressed and cautious. Keep scanning, Simon. I want to know more about their tech. Might come in handy. Ahead of them, Lyrax stopped before a massive door that slid open silently, revealing a dimly lit chamber. Inside, the air was heavy with a mix of floral and metallic scents. In the center of the room lay a colossal figure, the Xylixian queen. Her body was elongated and adorned with intricate carvings that glowed faintly in the dim light. Surrounding her were other Xylixians, their bodies smaller and less ornate, all seemingly in a state of mourning. "This is our queen," Lyrax said, his voice somber. "Her illness is beyond our ability to cure. We have tried everything." Lieutenant Mara Cole, who had been examining the surroundings with a tactical eye, stepped forward. "What exactly is wrong with her?" she asked, her tone professional yet empathetic. "The illness is genetic," one of the Xylixian scientists stepped forward to explain. "A mutation that has proven fatal in every case. It affects her ability to sustain the hive mind. Without her, our collective consciousness will fragment." Simon perked up at this. His interest in xenobiology sparked. "Is there a specific gene that's affected? Perhaps we could engineer a replacement or a treatment using human DNA," the scientist nodded. "Yes, that is our hope, but we lack the capability to manipulate human genetics." Elias considered their options. "We can help with that. My ship has the necessary equipment, but we'll need complete transparency and cooperation." Lyrax bowed, a gesture of deep respect. "Of course, Captain Reed. You have our gratitude and our full cooperation." The team spent several hours discussing the specifics with the Xylixian scientists. Plans were made to transport the necessary equipment from the Valiant to the planet and to establish a temporary lab within the structure. As they worked, Elias took a moment to observe the Queen. Despite her illness, there was a regal quality to her stillness, a commanding presence that resonated even in her weakened state. He felt a profound sense of responsibility, not just to his crew or the mission, but to this alien race that had placed their hopes in a human's hands. Later, as the Xylixians led them to a room where they could rest, Elias pulled Mara aside. "Keep your guard up. We're not just dealing with a medical issue here. There's politics involved, and possibly dissenters who may not welcome our interference." Mara nodded, her eyes sharp. "I've noticed a few guards who seem less than thrilled about our presence. I'll set up rotations, make sure we're covered." "Good," Elias said, his mind racing with the implications of their mission. "We're not just here to save a queen. We're potentially altering the course of this planet's history." As night fell on Xylix, the team settled in, unaware of the challenges that lay ahead, but ready to face them together. Their journey had just begun, and each member knew that the success of their mission could mean the difference between life and death for an entire civilization. The temporary lab was a hive of activity, with both human and Xylixian scientists working side by side. Captain Elias Reed watched as Dr. Simon Fletcher and the Xylixian geneticists pored over data and biological samples. The fusion of human and alien technology around them created an environment ripe with potential for groundbreaking discoveries. Simon looked up from the microscope, excitement in his eyes. "Elias, the genetic structure of the Queen is more complex than we anticipated. But there's good news. I think we've isolated the gene responsible for her condition. If we can synthesize a corrective gene sequence from your DNA, it might just work." Elias nodded, his expression serious. "Do what you need to do, Simon. Just keep me informed." As the work continued, Elias decided to explore more of the Xylixian structure, hoping to understand their culture better. Accompanied by Lyrax, he ventured deeper into the living corridors of the hive. "Why have your people never sought help from other species before?" Elias asked, genuinely curious as the ambient light from the walls cast soft shadows around them. Lyrax's antennae twitched, a sign of discomfort. "We have been isolated by choice and circumstance. Past conflicts made us wary of outsiders. We lost much to war." Elias listened intently, aware that the mistrust was not just a product of xenophobia, but of genuine historical grievances. Yet you reached out to us, he observed. You are different, Lyrax replied. Your species has a reputation for compassion. We observed you long before we made contact. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden commotion. They rushed towards the source of the noise and found a group of Xylixian guards confronting Lieutenant Mara Cole and another member of the human team. We do not trust these humans. They meddle in things they do not understand, one of the guards exclaimed, his voice harsh. Mara stood her ground, her hand near her weapon but not on it. We're here to help. Your queen will die without our intervention. Elias stepped forward, his presence commanding. We were invited here under a banner of peace, he said firmly to the guard. I understand your concerns, but we must work together. Our fates are now linked. Lyrax intervened, addressing the guards in their clicking, chittering language. The tension didn't dissolve entirely, but the guards stepped back, allowing Elias and Mara to leave without further incident. As they walked back to the lab, Mara sighed. That was too close for comfort. Do you think there'll be more trouble? Possibly, Elias admitted. But we can't back down. Not when we're this close to a solution. Back in the lab, Simon greeted them with a grin. We've made a breakthrough. We can start the synthesis process tonight. If all goes well, we could have a treatment ready by morning. That night, as the team prepared for the procedure, Elias couldn't help but feel the weight of his role in this delicate situation. He was no diplomat, but here he was, bridging gaps between species, navigating political tensions, all while trying to save a life that held the key to the survival of an entire race. In the quiet moments before the procedure, Elias found himself alone with his thoughts. He had never envisioned such a scenario when he first set out to explore the stars. He was a captain, a soldier, an explorer, not a savior. Yet here he was, at the center of a story that felt larger than life itself. The night stretched on as Dr. Simon Fletcher and his team, both human and Xylixian, worked tirelessly to synthesize the corrective gene sequence. Captain Elias Reed kept a watchful eye on the process, aware of the tensions simmering just below the surface. Suddenly, an alarm blared throughout the temporary lab. Simon rushed to a console, his brow furrowed as he analyzed the data flashing across the screen. The gene sequencer. It's been tampered with. The synthetic gene is destabilizing, he exclaimed, panic edging into his voice. Elias snapped into action, calling for Lieutenant Mara Cole over his communicator. Mara, we have a situation in the lab. I need security here now. As Mara and additional security personnel hurried in, Elias and Simon inspected the damage. The machine, crucial for creating the life-saving treatment, was irreparably sabotaged. Simon shook his head, dismayed. This sets us back significantly. We'll need to recalibrate everything and start from scratch. Elias clenched his jaw, frustration boiling over. Who would do this? Who stands to gain from the Queen's death? Mara, ever the tactician, was already thinking ahead. I'll review the security footage. Whoever did this must have left some trace. The lab was a flurry of activity as the team worked to contain the damage and secure the area. Meanwhile, Mara accessed the surveillance systems, which had recorded the moments leading up to the sabotage. The footage was grainy, but it clearly showed a shadowy figure tampering with the equipment. This isn't just a random act of vandalism, Mara noted, her eyes narrowing as she replayed the video. This was calculated. It looks like one of the Xylixians, but I can't tell who. Elias watched over her shoulder, a sinking feeling in his gut. We need to confront Lyrax with this. He needs to see that not all his people want our help. Together with a small contingent, Elias and Mara confronted Lyrax, showing him the footage. The Xylixian steward's antennae drooped, a sign of his distress. This is troubling, Lyrax admitted, his voice filled with sorrow. There are factions within our ranks who believe we should let the natural course of fate act, even if it means the end of our queen. Elias's respect for Lyrax's candidness grew, but so did his urgency. We don't have much time. If you know who might be responsible, we need that information. This isn't just about your queen anymore. It's about preventing a crisis that could tear your society apart. Lyrax nodded, resigned. I will gather the leaders of our factions. It's time for open dialogue. Meanwhile, I trust you will continue with your efforts to save the queen. As Lyrax left to prepare for what would surely be a tense assembly, Elias turned to his team. "Let's get back to work. We have a queen to save and a saboteur to stop." Back in the lab, Simon and his team, both shaken and determined, began the painstaking process of recalibrating the gene sequencer. Each member of the team knew the stakes were high, not just for the queen, but for the fragile peace they were trying to uphold. Elias watched them, pride and worry intermingled in his chest. They were far from home, wrapped up in an alien world's politics and crises, yet they persevered. They were here to do a job, and they wouldn't leave until it was done. The tension in the Xylixian structure was palpable as Captain Elias Reed and his team worked against the clock to repair the sabotaged gene sequencer. Dr. Simon Fletcher and the joint team of human and Xylixian scientists were making progress, but the pressure was mounting with each passing hour. Meanwhile, Lyrax had convened a meeting with the leaders of the various factions within the Xylixian society. Elias attended, hoping to understand the internal dynamics and perhaps sway the dissenters to support their cause. As Elias entered the large, organically shaped meeting chamber, he could feel dozens of multifaceted eyes on him. The chamber buzzed with the low, chittering conversations of the Xylixians. Lyrax stood at the center, waiting for silence before he began. "Esteemed leaders," Lyrax started, his voice amplified by the acoustics of the room, "we face a grave threat not just to our queen but to our entire way of life. Some among us fear the involvement of humans in our affairs, but I say our fear must not dictate our survival." Murmurs rippled through the chamber as Lyrax continued. "The humans have shown nothing but goodwill towards us. Sabotaging their efforts to save our queen is an act of self-destruction." Elias listened, impressed by Lyrax's leadership and clarity. When it was his turn to speak, he stepped forward, addressing the assembly with a calm authority. "I understand your concerns about our presence and our technology, but our only goal here is to save your queen. Without her, your collective unity risks falling apart. We are here to help, not to harm." His words seemed to resonate with some of the assembly, but others were clearly unconvinced, their body language tense and closed off. Back in the lab, Simon and the team had successfully recalibrated the gene sequencer. "We're ready to attempt the synthesis again," Simon communicated over his handheld device. "Proceed," Elias instructed, his focus shifting back to the task at hand. He excused himself from the meeting, his presence there no longer as crucial as what was happening in the lab. Upon returning, Elias was greeted by a flurry of activity. Simon was initiating the sequence, his fingers moving deftly over the controls. "This has to work," Simon muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The process was delicate, the atmosphere charged with a mix of hope and anxiety. Hours passed as molecular structures were manipulated and reformed under the careful supervision of the team. Finally, Simon looked up from his monitor, a broad smile spreading across his face. "We've got it," he announced, relief evident in his voice. "The gene sequence is stable. We can start the treatment." Elias felt a surge of triumph. "Prepare the dose immediately. Let's not waste any more time." The treatment was prepared with meticulous care, and together Elias and Simon administered it to the queen under the watchful eyes of her royal guard and several Xylixian scientists. The queen's condition had deteriorated significantly, making the stakes even higher. As they administered the gene therapy, the queen's chamber was silent, except for the soft hum of medical equipment. After the treatment was complete, all they could do was wait. Elias stood beside the queen, watching for any sign of improvement. The hours ticked by slowly. Just as the first hints of dawn began to light the sky outside, the queen stirred. Her movements were slight at first, but soon she opened her eyes, her gaze clear and aware. A collective sigh of relief swept through the room. Lyrax, who had joined them, expressed his gratitude with a deep bow. "You have done more than save our queen," he said to Elias and his team. "You have given us hope for a new beginning." Elias nodded, aware that while the immediate crisis was over, the journey towards mutual understanding and cooperation was just beginning. But for now, they had won a significant victory, not just for the queen, but for the future of Xylixian human relations. After the successful administration of the gene therapy, a palpable sense of relief washed over everyone present. The Zalixian Queen's recovery was nothing short of miraculous, prompting both her subjects and the human team to celebrate their hard-won victory against the looming threat of her demise. In the days that followed, Captain Elias Reed observed a marked change in the atmosphere of the Zalixian structure. The Zalixians, initially wary and distant, began to interact more openly with the human crew. The Queen herself, now regaining strength daily, requested Elias's presence. His role in her recovery had made him a figure of significant interest and respect among her people. As Elias entered the Queen's chamber, he was struck by the transformation in her appearance. Her color had returned, and the carvings on her exoskeleton seemed to glow with a vibrant energy. She moved with a grace that belied her recent brush with death, her multiple eyes focusing intently on Elias as he approached. "Captain Reed," she began, her voice resonating deeply, "your actions have not only saved my life, but have also bridged a gap between our worlds. I find myself indebted to you and your species." Elias bowed slightly, feeling the weight of her words. "Your Highness, it was our honor to assist. We hope this can be the start of a new relationship between our peoples." The Queen nodded, her antennae twitching in agreement. "Indeed it shall. But there is more I must discuss with you." She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "During the treatment, a bond was formed between us, as per the ancient rights of my people. It is a bond of life and leadership, tying your fate to ours." Elias was taken aback, not fully understanding the implications. "A bond, Your Highness?" "Yes," she continued. "It is a connection that grants you a status akin to royalty in our culture. You are now my consort in the eyes of my people, a position of great honor and responsibility." The revelation left Elias momentarily speechless. He was a captain, a soldier, not a consort to an alien queen. He struggled to formulate a response, aware of the cultural significance of her declaration. "I am honored, Your Highness, but I must consider what this means for my crew and my duties to humanity," Elias finally said, his voice steady despite his swirling thoughts. The Queen seemed to understand his hesitation. "Take your time, Captain. This bond does not require you to stay, but it does require you to understand its importance. You will always be welcomed here as a leader and a protector." As Elias left the chamber, his mind raced with the implications of what had transpired. He needed to communicate with his superiors back on Earth, but deep down, he felt a stirring of something profound and transformative. The bond with the Queen and her people was not just a diplomatic formality. It was a deeply personal connection that had altered his life's trajectory. In the following days, Elias engaged in discussions with both his crew and Zalixian leaders. The crew expressed a mix of astonishment and concern, but also support. They had witnessed firsthand the positive impact of their intervention on Zilix. Mara Cole, ever pragmatic, approached him one evening as they surveyed the stars from the observation deck of the Valiant. "Elias, whatever you decide, remember this. You've started something bigger than any of us. This bond, it's not just about politics. It's about setting a precedent for human-alien relations." Elias nodded, gazing out into the vast expanse of space. The weight of his new responsibilities was daunting, but it also filled him with a sense of purpose he had never anticipated. His role had evolved in ways he could never have imagined, but he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, bonded not only to a queen, but to the hopeful promise of a united future. Captain Elias Reed stood before the assembly of both human and Zilixian representatives, a testament to the unprecedented collaboration between the two species. The chamber buzzed with a mix of anticipation and skepticism from both sides. Elias knew this was a pivotal moment, not only for his newfound role as consort to the Zalixian queen, but also for the broader implications of interspecies relations. "The alliance we propose today is born not out of necessity, but from a mutual desire for growth and understanding," Elias began, his voice resonating through the chamber. The translators worked seamlessly, ensuring every word was understood across species. Beside him, the Queen, now fully recovered and radiating strength, added, Our two peoples possess a wealth of knowledge and technology. By sharing these resources, we stand to gain far more than we could alone. Whispers filled the air, and Elias could see the mixed reactions among the audience. Some faces showed intrigue and hope, while others bore expressions of distrust and fear. He understood their reservations. The history of human interactions with alien species was not without conflict. Mara Cole, acting as a liaison for the human delegation, stepped forward to detail the proposal. This alliance will begin with cultural and scientific exchanges. We believe that understanding each other's cultures is as important as sharing technology. A prominent Xylixian scientist, who had been instrumental in the gene therapy project, presented data on potential joint ventures, including environmental regeneration and space exploration. Together, we can achieve what might take centuries to accomplish alone, he explained, showcasing simulations of collaborative projects. However, dissent was still present. A Xylixian leader from a conservative faction raised a concern. How do we ensure that our sovereignty is respected? We've seen too often how alliances can lead to dominance by one side. Elias nodded, acknowledging the concern. We propose the establishment of a joint council, with equal representation from both our species. No major decision will be made without this council's approval. The Queen supported his statement. We have learned a great deal from Captain Reed and his crew. They have shown us that humans respect honor and commitment. This alliance is a chance for both our worlds to prosper together. As the assembly continued, private discussions and debates filled the hall. Elias and the Queen met with various delegates, addressing concerns and outlining the benefits of the alliance. Hours later, the representatives reconvened for the final vote. Tension filled the room as each delegate cast their vote. Finally, the results were displayed. The motion to enter into an alliance had passed, but just narrowly. Relief washed over Elias as applause broke out among the supporters. The Queen squeezed his hand, a gesture of gratitude and partnership. Thank you, Elias. Today, we made history. As the assembly dispersed, Elias and Mara walked back to their temporary quarters. It's going to be a challenging road ahead, Mara said, thoughtful. But I think we're on the right path. Elias looked out over the Xylixian landscape, now lit by the setting suns. We are, he agreed. Today we laid the groundwork for a future where our children will see our two species not as potential enemies, but as allies. The challenges ahead were daunting, but Elias felt ready to face them. With the Queen at his side and his crew backing him up, he was confident that this alliance would lead to a new era of prosperity and peace. The horizon was wide open, and for the first time it seemed filled with infinite possibilities. In the newly established Joint Council chamber on Xylix, Captain Elias Reed and the Xylixian Queen stood side by side, addressing a crowd that was a vibrant mix of human and Xylixian faces. The chamber, a stunning synthesis of human engineering and Xylixian organic architecture, symbolized the new era of cooperation between the two species. Today marks the beginning of our united path, Elias began, his voice steady and clear. We stand before you not as rulers but as partners, committed to the prosperity and well-being of both our peoples. The Queen, her presence commanding and serene, continued. Our alliance was born from necessity, but it will grow through mutual respect and shared goals. We have already seen the benefits of our cooperation, and we pledge to continue this journey with open hearts and minds. Around them, the representatives of both species nodded, the initial skepticism that had once clouded their faces, now replaced by a cautious optimism. The recent weeks had been filled with intensive workshops, cultural exchanges, and joint scientific ventures, all aimed at fostering understanding and collaboration. Mara Cole, who had been appointed as the human ambassador to Xylix, stepped forward to detail the next steps. We are initiating several joint projects, including the development of a shared space station that will serve as a hub for further exploration and research. This station will be staffed equally by humans and Xylixians and will operate under the laws set forth by the Joint Council. A Xylixian engineer added, We are also launching a cultural exchange program that will allow our young people to learn about each other's worlds. We believe that by understanding each other's cultures, arts, and histories, we can prevent the fears and prejudices of the past from affecting our future. As the Assembly discussed these initiatives, it was clear that the journey ahead would be full of challenges. Yet there was a palpable sense of hope that these challenges could be met together. After the official meeting concluded, Elias and the Queen walked out onto a balcony overlooking the vast, lush landscapes of Xylix. Elias took a moment to reflect on the incredible journey that had brought him here. "It feels like a dream sometimes," he said, watching the twin suns set on the horizon. The Queen smiled, her eyes reflecting the last light of the day. "It is very real, Elias, and it is only the beginning. We have much to do, much to learn from each other." "Only forward, then," Elias replied, his voice filled with determination. "Only forward," the Queen echoed, her gaze fixed on the horizon. As night fell, the stars began to twinkle in the clear sky, a reminder of the vast universe still waiting to be explored. Elias knew that the Alliance would face tests and trials, but he also knew that they had built a strong foundation, a mutual commitment to progress and peace. With the Queen by his side and his crew behind him, Elias was ready to face whatever came next. For him, for the Queen, and for their united peoples, the future was a canvas yet to be painted, promising new adventures and new horizons. As the stars shone brightly above, reflecting off the bioluminescent architecture of the chamber, Elias felt a profound connection to everything around him. This was his home now, as much as any place had ever been, and together they would move only forward, into a future filled with hope and infinite possibilities.